And I liked that page, and I got on and I read something, and I just couldn't get through the story hardly. I mean, my heart was just reaching out. It was just like, wow. So I wrote back to her on it, and I talked to her about it, and I said to her, you have a story that needs to be told. And then the Lord reminded me that one of the reasons she was in the class is she wants to write a book, and believe that God's leading her to write a book about her journey. And I'm like, oh, wow, Lord, I didn't remember that. So I remembered it at that time. And she's had even more connections, been more intentional about connecting, and I'm like, Lord, you're doing something here, and I'm not getting it. And I finally got it the other day. So I want to share her testimony with you, because it's about healing. It's about what God's doing here right now. And it's an invitation for us as well. It's entitled, This Is How I Fight My Battles. This is how I fight my battles. How we deal with the disappointment of today will determine the fruitfulness of what we walk in tomorrow. How we deal with the disappointment of today will determine the fruitfulness of what we walk in tomorrow. What a journey we've been on with Clara in her 5 short years of life. Our journey started with her being whisked away from me seconds after she was delivered. I didn't get to meet the baby I had just birthed. Worse yet, the report from the NICU was not good. I felt helpless as I laid in my hospital bed. I begged God not to take Clara before I had the chance to willingly give her to Him. I wanted the opportunity to lay her on the altar as an act of worship and surrender. If she died before I even met her, I would be robbed of giving God my first moment with her. But I did get to meet her. I sang over her in the NICU. I prayed over her. I spoke words over her life. When I finally got to hold her, I lifted her up to heaven. She is yours. Thank you for letting me borrow her. Give me the grace to never take her back out of your hands. Clara spent much of her first year of life in the hospital. In my fear, desperation, and exhaustion, I took her back out of God's hands and off of that altar. Clearly, God was unqualified to deal with the magnitude of Clara's situation. Or maybe He just didn't care. Either way, Clara and I were going to have to fight this one on our own. Many times I thought I would be saying goodbye to Clara. Many times I looked at her tiny body hooked up to so many machines and tearfully promised her that I would never stop fighting for her as long as she never stopped fighting. Where was God when my tiny baby was too sick to cry as nurses tried for the 9th or 10th time to get an IV started? I looked in her tiny brown eyes each time she was being poked and told her, look in Mommy's eyes and borrow my courage. I have enough courage for the both of us. But secretly, I wasn't courageous. I was actually imploding from the sadness and the fear. Clara spent her first Christmas in the hospital. It was there on Christmas Eve on the cold hospital floor that everything changed. God Himself sat on the hard floor with me and wrapped us both in a blanket. He wrapped me with His love and wrapped Himself in with my sadness. There is no lack in my kingdom. Her sickness isn't from me. She is complete, He declared. He told me that He would fill the holes in her DNA with Him. She would therefore be stronger than others with naturally complete DNA because her DNA was completed with Him, by Him, and for Him. This declaration started a season of endless miracles. We were told Clara would need a feeding tube, yet God gently reminded us that Clara is complete. Clara has never required a feeding tube. We were told that she would never walk. This is only partially true. She can walk, but she chooses to dance and run instead. We were told that Clara might not ever talk. Yes, she doesn't talk in sentences. She speaks in paragraphs. She's also the first one to use her voice to pray for others. She was diagnosed with seizures in infancy, and we were told that she had a 50% chance of dying from one. She hasn't had a seizure in 4.5 years and no meds. A tumor believed to be cancerous in her eye disappeared overnight. Miraculous improvements to her health were made almost daily. For those 4.5 years, we dwelled in a place of security and confidence. Our circumstances were good, therefore God was good. Clara was back in the hands of God and back on the altar of surrender. God was fighting for Clara, so Clara and I didn't have to fight. Life was good. until it wasn't. This year alone, Clara's been to the ED 9 times. 5 of those visits have been in the last 6 weeks. 3 of those visits were last week alone. Again and again, doctors stabilized her but couldn't figure out the cause of her fragility. 2 specialists at UNC Chapel Hill told me nothing was wrong. I fired them both. One specialist at UNC Chapel Hill said clearly something is wrong, but I've never seen this before. I don't know where to begin. Clara's geneticist couldn't pinpoint the source of Clara's crashes that she was experiencing. We consulted with a specialist in California who referred us to Duke. While waiting to get into Duke, Clara crashed 3 more times. In the last 2 months, the enemy has robbed us of resources such as time, money, fellowship, sleep, and time together as a family. He has delayed our plans and our dreams. He has attempted to keep us in a place of chaos and confusion when God is calling us to a place of clarity and conquest. We have been robbed of resources, but those can be returned to us. What hasn't been stolen from us is our identity, our security, our joy, our authority, or our peace. Do I get angry? Yes. Do I have questions? Yes. Am I exhausted? Yes. Do I wonder why Clara's body stopped living in response to God's declaration of completion? Most definitely. Do I wonder why many that we pray for are healed and yet Clara seems to be declining? Oh, yes. Do I want to take Clara back off the altar? Sometimes. This is where God is stretching me and challenging me. He's calling me to live in response to Him and not in reaction to Clara's health. Exhaustion makes this challenging but not impossible. He is further rooting me in the principle that my circumstances don't determine the goodness of God. It is actually the goodness of God that determines the truth about my circumstances. Mostly, He's taking me to a higher vantage point to see the battle from His perspective. From up here, I can clearly see that the enemy is attempting to distract, confuse, and delay us. He wants to drag us to his level and engage us in warfare from down on his territory. But we can't fight fire with fire. We won't win. We are called to wage warfare from a higher place. Our weapons aren't human. They are supernatural and mighty. Yes. So how do we engage war from a higher place? Through our identity, our authority, and our voice. Each morning I walk in my garden and make declarations through song. My peace will return. My joy will return. I won't lay down my keys of authority. I use them to unlock impossible doors. Yes. Doors of health and unusual resources. I close and lock the doors of sickness and delay. Clarity is coming. Completion will manifest. I will have recompense for what has been stolen. Obstacles are becoming level ground. Clara is secure, safe, and resting as long as she's on the altar. I share this not as someone who has arrived, and also not as someone who is being disingenuous. This is my actual stand, and this is my actual journey. It is currently being played out. I have declared war on the things that have declared war on Clara and my family. I won't take her back off the altar, and I won't lay down in the battlefield. I see the victory. Clara is more than a conqueror, and I am confident that I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Yes. I have a little video clip that will show you who she is here. And she says this about the video. The video is from our family worship time last night. She and Gabby loved to dance before the Lord. At one point, Clara fell down out of exhaustion. Her hands and feet are bruised from her IVs. Her muscles are weak from dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. She expressed frustration because she didn't want to disappoint God by not finishing out the song for Him. My heart broke for her. So I scooped her up, put her on my shoulders, and I used my strength to help her finish her dance. Her shouts of joy and the pureness of her laughter will be something I remember forever. I felt God was inviting us to be part of Clara's story. So I texted her and I said, we have a congregation. I'd like to invite them to pray for her. Would you be open to that? She said yes. We have all kinds of healing needs in this congregation. Look at the number of people who are standing here. Do you think God's going to heal this girl? Yeah. I believe that He's going to. I believe the reason she's experiencing this again is not a lack of Janice's faith, but because He wants to embrace the wider body of faith in that battle. The enemy's just doubled his efforts. And He says, You know, God is saying, I've got an army that's going to support you. I've got an army that's going to support you. So, here's that microphone. We can pass this around. People have something to pray for her, for someone else. If you got someone that's standing next to you, you want to have a prayer for them. I'm not concerned about that we're just praying for this person. I think we should pray for Clara. Did we show the video clip? Not yet. Not yet. You want to play that? She's the taller girl. They have 3 kids. It's short, but it gives you a picture of who she is. I'm just going to start our prayer time here. So, Father, thank you for every person that's come forward here.